Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Well, for the past 2 decades, the government has been shepherding asylum seekers around the country, shifting them away from London and the South East. Originally, this policy, Dispersal, was about sharing the burden. But over time, it's turned into something else. Local authorities can't be compelled to take people, and many don't. Instead, it's in the Midlands and North, where a large proportion of the 40 or so thousand covered by the scheme end up in a small number of council wards. Today, the Home Affairs Select Committee called on the government to urgently reconsider the operation of the dispersal policy. Here's James Clayton.
Britain's asylum system is a story of disparity. A north-south divide that many believe is putting a strain on areas that can least afford it. Stoke has long housed asylum seekers. It's not the same everywhere. The asylum dispersal scheme is incredibly varied. Places like here in Stoke and others in the Midlands and the North, well, they take in hundreds of asylum seekers. There are entire areas in the South that simply don't take any, including Theresa May's local authority. In the entire southeast of England, there are 481 people on the asylum dispersal scheme. That's out of a population of 8.5 million. The story is broadly similar in the east of England and in the southwest. In Stoke, with a population of 250,000, there are nearly twice as many asylum seekers as the entire southeast. And it's not just Stoke. Bolton, Wigan, Rochdale, Sandwell, Swansea, Stockton and Oldham, and a number of other areas each have more than the entire southeast. Around 300 councils across the UK aren't part of the scheme. Kevin Sauntry is sorting through donations of warm clothes.
There, Ange, is that one of the kiddies one, isn't it?
He works for the charity Asha, who provides support for asylum seekers in Stoke. He believes the system just isn't fair.
We could be more sensible in the way we distribute people and more discerning, and it shouldn't be done on what appears to be a, dare I say, class situation.
Do you think it's as much as that? You think it's...
I do. What I mean by that is if we looked at perhaps where the Prime Minister lives, I doubt whether that we have many asylum seekers in that area, if you want it straight.
Well, on the dispersal
Yeah, on the dispersal
itself, there are none in her local authority.
Oh, well, there you go. That says a lot about the way, the attitude that exists.
In today's Home Affairs Select Committee report, MPs turn their fire on the quality of accommodation provided to asylum seekers. That's a difficult subject when many people in the UK are living in substandard housing. But those who work with asylum seekers, like Lydia, describe pretty grim conditions.
Some of them who are even sharing the same bed, adults from different countries, not knowing each other, and sleeping on the same bed. It is bad because can you imagine meeting someone you don't know and you sleep on the same bed?
Conservative councillor Dan Jellyman thinks his party and Theresa May can do a lot more. A lot of these councils that aren't taking any asylum seekers are actually Conservative councils.
Yes, well, as I say, I think the system needs reform. Here in Stoke, we run the council with independence, and I'm particularly proud that Stoke stands up to the mark and that we take our fair share of asylum seekers, and I would certainly encourage other councils to do the same.
Do you think it would be an easier sell if people in Stoke thought the system was a bit fairer?
Yes, absolutely I do. I think a lot of people in Stoke accept that it's the right thing to do to take asylum seekers, but there is always the feeling that other areas could do more.
For Kevin, there are consequences to a perceived unfairness that even stretch to Brexit.
Well, when you put pressure on areas that are already struggling for employment, that is bound to create pressure. So that's another reason why we need to be just more discerning about what we do. It will influence the way people think and vote. And that's
why you think it should be fairer?
That is why things should be fairer.
Tamba has just received his leave to remain. He's thankful to the city that gave him shelter.
Just I feel like part of Stoke because here, at least when I have problem, I know where to go. You know, I can come here, they can direct me, give me better directions, you know. So I feel like part of Stoke. I see myself as part of Stoke rather, you know, rather going to any other city.
Places like Stoke are supporting hundreds of people like Tamba. The question is, should more affluent areas be doing the same?
James Clayton there. So what might be done? Conservative councillor David Simmons is the chairman of the Local Government Association's Asylum, Refugee and Migration Task Group. And Rachel Mantell is from the charity Refugees at Home. Welcome to you both. David Simmons, can I start with you? You've got a few wards in Stoke with twice as many asylum seekers as the whole southeast of England. I mean, how has that happened and what can be done about it?
Well, all of the councils in the southeast of England volunteered collectively around 2 years ago to become dispersal areas. The issue is that the Home Office's contracts with the private companies that manage dispersal are set at such a low budget that they're not procuring accommodation in those places. And that's
they can't afford to put people there.
They simply can't afford to put people there. It's not that the councils are saying that they won't be dispersal areas, that they don't want asylum seekers. The issue is to do with the cost. When those contractors won those bids, they did so on the basis of only housing people in the cheapest possible parts of the UK. And not just the cheapest parts of the UK, but often the cheapest and the worst accommodation in those parts of the country.
But when you do that, I mean, obviously you raise pressure on public services. I mean, it goes much wider in money terms than just the cost of housing.
Well, councils have been campaigning for a big change in this area. Now, we know everybody's doing different things to support refugees. So, for example, every council pretty much is taking in refugee children. London has more refugees in it than most other parts of the country. But the dispersal programme, which is specifically for asylum seekers who are dependent upon money that's provided and support that's provided through these Home Office contracts, are funneling people into communities that are already under pressure. And we've argued that schemes like the Vulnerable Persons Relocation Scheme, which we designed with the Home Office for Syrian families, that is based upon councils volunteering accommodation they've got in their areas, should be used as a model, because that's been implemented with great success. It's been great, a very positive experience for the families, and it's been a positive experience for the councils that have come forward to do that as well.
Rachel Mantell, I mean, the sums involved, taxpayers' money, are pretty big, aren't they? The contract for the next 10 years, $4 billion.
You'd expect to get more for it,
well,
really, wouldn't you?
What is $4 billion of taxpayers' money buying in terms of accommodation? Because we heard some fairly grim stuff there from Stoke.
Yes, and I think that what you saw was not the worst of it. It's not buying what you or I would consider to be decent housing. It's very often overcrowded, multiple people living in rooms together, which, I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to share a room with a stranger. We have heard stories from our guests about toilets leaking into kitchens. We regularly hear stories about vermin infestations. We seem to be spending an awful lot of money and not getting very much in return. So quite apart from being somebody that works with refugees, as a taxpayer, I think that's a bit inadequate.
Now, you heard what David Simmons said there about councils in the South East were willing in principle. Now, do you accept that, or do you think there's some NIMBYism here that people don't want asylum seekers in certain parts of the country? Because it's a voluntary thing, isn't it, accepting dispersal?
I have never encountered NIMBYism. I have encountered warmth, welcome, care. You know, British people are incredibly welcoming to people that come here from elsewhere. They recognise that people are escaping appalling situations, you know, war, dictatorial regimes, persecution because of their sexuality. Our charity hosts about 160 people a night, and those are completely ordinary members of the British public that said, you know, we want to step in where we see a problem. I don't think it's the British people that is the issue. I don't think that there is hatred of asylum seekers.
Sorry, before we come back to David, what do you think should be done to solve this problem of fairness in terms of how many people go to which parts of the country?
I would like to see more money in the system, so I would like to see a system where they can afford to put people into other parts of the country. But I would also like to see the contracts managed to the terms of the contract. So if you read the report today, only about 25% of the accommodation meets the standards that the government set in their contract. I can't think of many other contracts that would be allowed to run with that sort of failure rate.
David Simmons, I mean, this is another contractor disaster, isn't it? I mean, putting all this out through these contractors seems to have produced a situation in terms of quality where, for big outlay, the public and the taxpayer get a rather shabby return.
We've seen estate agents walking away from procuring accommodation through this programme on moral grounds. So I think we need to be clear there is real concern in the system about how this is operating. But those councils in the South East have not just signed up in principle, they've been actively engaged in trying to enable asylum families to be dispersed into those local areas. The big challenge is by cutting councils out of the process, the Home Office and the contractors are losing out on the local knowledge. We know who the slum landlords are that we would avoid, but in many cases those are the same landlords that the contractors are using to place the most vulnerable people.
David Simmons from the Local Government Association, Rachel Mantell from Refugees at Home, thank you both very much.